And I was told this yesterday morning when I was here, and so I don't want to presuppose, but one of my wonderings, one of my thoughts were, especially if this is your holidays and you go through grief, it's hard to decorate the house. Right? I know sometimes it's really, when my dad, when my stepmom died, and it was really hard for him to kind of go through ornaments, that kind of deal. And so I wondered if perhaps that hardness, being able to decorate your church and doing it as a group, brings some healing into that space. Is that presupposition correct?
I think it was. I mean, that was the reason we sort of all wanted to do it.
Yeah. So, well, and thank you. Because so many people now get to enjoy that gift of coming in here. And I don't know if you guys noticed, like on the trees that are over by the choir loft, the little choir angels up on top. Right? I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah. They did, and the stockings. I didn't notice the stockings last year. All of the boots over there at the sound booth are all different cowboy boots. Isn't that great? Yeah, it's just so beautiful. And the poinsettias or poinsettias, whatever you want to say, those will be coming in this week, I think. Yeah, poinsettia. Yeah. So Hootie Hootie Hoo is happening. The cantata this weekend. So I know we have an orchestra happening. The Tucson Boys Choirs will be a part of that. So that's Saturday night at 5. I would get here early for parking. And then also Sunday morning at 9:15, again, I'd get here early for parking. If you are a 1045er, excuse me, choking. If you are a 1045er, oh, they took my water away. We will be doing worship outside on the Memorial Plaza on Sunday because it's hard for our 1045 worship team to deal with this. So we'll be doing worship outside on the plaza at 10:45 on Sunday morning. And then the following weekend is our children will be, we started a little bit of a children's choir, and so at the 5 o'clock and 9:15 that following weekend, during the sermon time, our children will be presenting the message. So that'll be great. And then the following weekend is Christmas Eve and Advent 4. And so on that Sunday, the 24th, because it's Christmas Eve, we will do one service in the morning, and I believe it's at 9. And then we do our Christmas Eve services. We do a 3 o'clock, which, if you haven't, it is all kids. The music is all kids. The reading is all kids. Kids who play piano, play guitar, I mean, just all different types. And Josh Carlson, who is on our staff, Josh is in school to be a pastor. And so if he was at a regular seminary, he would have been doing some preaching, some worship leading by now. And so I asked him if he wanted to work as a pastor on the 3 o'clock and the 5 o'clock Christmas Eve services. So he and I will be preaching together. And you may or may not know, but I've known Josh since he was like 5 years old, and he was my confirmation kid, and him and Nicole, so I've just known them their whole lives. So 3 o'clock is our kids. 5 o'clock is contemporary on Christmas Eve, and we're looking at some really great dramatic stuff for that. 7 o'clock is traditional on Christmas Eve here, and then 9 o'clock is traditional as well as we go outside, and we end the 9 o'clock service with our candles out in Memorial Plaza. So Christmas Eve is a whole thing, and while we're talking about it, the following weekend, the 31st is the Sunday, the New Year's Eve, and we'll just have one service again on New Year's Eve. And so that'll be a 9 o'clock service, and it's a lessons and carols. So there's no sermon, but we will have communion. So December's a crazy time. It's a great time, but our time is really kind of crazy in that. All right, speaking of crazy, I think I may have shared this story before, but I don't know if I shared it in here. When I was a youth director in Denver, Colorado, so that was 2003, 2005, I was sitting in my office, kids came in, they said, "Hey, Erin, you didn't have cell phones when you grew up." Nope, didn't have cell phones. They said, "How'd you know what you were going to do on a Friday night?" I said, oh, it's this genius thing. It's called making plans. Like we start talking about it on Monday. We kind of figure it out, get our parents' permission by Wednesday, Thursday, and here's an even better part, folks. we stuck to those plans. Like we actually showed up as to where we were going to go. This was so foreign to them. They couldn't fathom this. And they said, well, gosh, it's just so weird. Like when we get in our cars on Friday night, we text our friends, and the plans have changed 5 times by then already. And so this understanding of how I grew up had massively changed, right? That this generation now had no clue what that was like.
How we connected.
Yeah, or how we connected. Now, for the majority of you, I'm a lot younger than you are. So I can only imagine how, I said majority, but I can only imagine how you grew up has massively changed. So for our opening question today, for our beginning part to kind of get to know one another, I want you to turn to someone, maybe someone you don't know, feel free to cross aisles, and share with each other. Did I give you these questions, Luke? Yeah. Excellent. Put up that first one there. Share with someone, how would you explain parts of how you grew up that teens and those in their 20s could not understand? How have things changed? I remember I had my old 8-track player, and I loved the little repeat, and they're like, what's an 8-track? Or like on your computers, you know, the save. We all know what that icon is, right? What is that icon when you hit save? It's your disc. Remember the old discs? That's what that icon is. I didn't have it when I grew up either. You didn't have 8 tracks? Oh man, radios where you can't choose what you play? Oh. Call and request. Oh, and remember the old like waiting for your favorite song to come on so you could hit record and the DJ would talk over the song and talk. Oh, so yeah.
We didn't have record.
Judy's like, yeah, I didn't even have that option.
It was vinyl, and now we're going back to vinyl.
Yes. All right, so get to know one another, share with each other things that you experience that people, teens in their 20s, they would have no clue what that was. I'll give you 5 minutes.
Well, what else besides vinyl? My era. One of the funniest things I've seen social media is watching teenagers with the room. And everybody's like, this is cool. And they
All right, take about one more minute. One more minute.
Oh, there you go. That's a great thing. Yep. And the same staff. You know what else? And then if it's
I think that's good. I love it.
it was always this kind.
All right, let's go ahead and bring it back. So, have some things changed since you were growing up? Yeah. And I think you guys have to learn how to experience change. Change is one of the things we talked about in this set of chapters for today is the fear of change. And I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and share this. It's a little inappropriate, but Pat walked out. He's in charge of HR, so I think I can share it now.
I'm still here.
Oh! Oh, so sad. Oh, thank you, Gary. Oh, praise Jesus. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Did you say I'm going to pass it around? No. Not post-COVID. Many of you guys know I was down in Florida last week to take care of some family business. And so I rented an Airbnb. It was at this cute little trailer park in Florida. Everything's a trailer park in Florida. And so the morning, it's probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going out to my car to kind of start my day. And so I walk out and there's this gentleman, older gentleman, probably 70s, maybe 80s, in a green sweatshirt walking by. And he looked at me and said, "Hey, is your belly warm? My hands are cold." And I looked at him. I said, "Excuse me?" And he thought that I just didn't hear him. And he said, "Is your belly warm? Because my hands are cold." And I said, "Sir, that is not appropriate." And he said, "Well, I was just trying to make you laugh. And like what I wanted to say is, well, you almost made me retch when I think about your hands on my belly, but I didn't." I said, I understand your intention, but that is really not appropriate to be said anymore. And he went, and walked away. But I thought about my father. Because my father would say things like that all the time. And I had to keep telling him, "Dad, that's no longer appropriate to say to women." And realizing that in his day and age, women did not have a voice. And so things that were said were approved because there was no other option. And so it was just assumed that it was okay. And if you do not have someone who loves you, do not have someone who gives you grace and compassion to help you learn that things have changed, then you're just kind of left behind. And so that I understood his intention. That was, for some weird reason, that was a "Hi, welcome to the neighborhood, hope you have a good time," right? Like that's what he was trying to do. Instead, here's a single woman in a brand new area staying at an Airbnb, and her first experience is an old man asking to touch her belly. And I'm not pregnant. Yes, Tony, worst pickup line I've ever heard. But change, right? If we don't have someone to help us walk through the change of the culture of the day and age, it can be really, really hard. And so we have to have some compassion. But change is something we fear. Like I'm sure this gentleman and others liked it when women didn't say, "Hey, that's not appropriate," right? Change can be hard. And we can fear change. And I say, how many Lutherans does it take to change a light bulb? Zero. Change? What does change mean? Right? Like we don't change our light bulbs, right? And you actually can do that with about any denomination because they all are about the same way. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. Let's not change who we are, and let's pray to our God. God, today, again, we come to you with laughter, with joy, but also with fear and anxiety. We come to you not knowing the future, but trusting that you are the one who is our future. So, Lord, in this time, help us to be faithful. Help us to open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to your words and to one another, so that we can share who you are creating us to be and how we understand this crazy, crazy world. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, we do have some new people here today, and so I just always love to recap, review, first of all, what this class is about. We all live in a world of fear and anxiety, and especially even more so now. That I was talking with someone, and we were talking about if anxious is different than anxiety. Is anxious different than anxiety in our modern world? So, for instance, I was anxious about going down to Florida, right? But I don't live in anxiety, right? When I found a really good book that I could read on the plane, my anxiousness went away because I wasn't thinking about the situation I was going to be walking into. But there are some people that even in the reading of the book, they still have a heightened sense of anxiety. Right? And so we live in a world and in a culture that is in that space, and we live with perpetrators who play on those anxieties and fears. Right? So whether it is a marketing campaign that says we're selling good deodorant because you don't want to stink, because you know what people will think of you when you stink, and you desperately don't want people to think that of you, right? That you stink, right? That you're not clean. Right? That you can't take care of yourself. So from a base of marketing to what that looks like, to you need the bigger the better, right? To our politics. Don't elect this person because you know what the world's going to happen if you elected this person. All of the fears that go into that, right? That we live in a world now, even more so on the tickety-talk, on all the social media, that plays on our fears and anxiety. And so now that we have more 24-hour access to it than we ever did before, the question is, as Christians, how do we walk assuredly in this world? And so again, off of Adam Hamilton's book, which I don't know why, whenever I decide to do a book study, everyone in the world decides to do the same study. So I had to go to 3 different places to get more books, so they are on their way. But it's how do we live with courage and hope in a world of anxiety and fear? And we do that through our faith. And so again, he kind of comes up with this beautiful way of thinking of fear, right? F-E-A-R. Face your fear with faith. And this time kind of talks about the hope bias. That you go into it with hope, faith, that things are going to be okay. Go in. My dad, and I'm sorry, folks, I'm just in a whole new wave of grief, so I think you might hear about him for a little bit longer. He was a Debbie Downer. My dad, the glass was always half empty. Always. He didn't know how to face your fear with hope. He always thought the world's going down. I also worked with a pastor, John Hoganson. He has since passed. We were at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church. We're the 5th largest Lutheran church in America, right? We'd be sitting in the front row. Pastor sat in the front row. He'd turn around. We'd only have like maybe 700 people in the deal. And he'd turn around. He's like, oh, ship's going down. Ship's going down. I'm like, dude, we have like more people in our sanctuary, and we haven't even ended the prelude than most churches in America. But he was not a hope guy. Jesus, but not a hope guy. Next, examine your assumptions in light of the facts, right? Think about what is this, and then let's do a little bit of research. Let's do a little bit of looking at what this is. Again, I had a great therapist who talked to me about my own thoughts and feelings and emotions, right? When I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone thinks I stink. She's like, okay, hold on to that thought for a second. And let's look at it. Why do you think that? Well, because they're crinkling up their nose. Okay. Did you put on deodorant this morning? Yeah. Did you shower? Yeah. Well, then maybe it's not you. Oh, okay. Like, examine the facts. And then she was really great. She said, sometimes you can just release those then. Sometimes you might want to put them down and hold on to them for a little bit longer. But have the ability to look outside, to examine your assumptions in light of the facts. Attack your anxieties with actions, right? You don't have to be a passive person in your own life, right? And again, what can you do to help with the anxieties, to help with the fears? Kind of how do we move so we're not just solid in our space? And then release your cares to God, right? If all else fails, pray. Right? That part of that is releasing, but it's also very much, my dad loved to fish, and down in Florida, he was a pier fisherman, he was a beach fisherman, he almost died several times. Like, in all seriousness, we were talking about this. There was one time when my stepsister was living with him, took his little bike, because he couldn't drive anymore, took his little bike, and he went down to the marina, and there were some kids who were fishing around where the boats are, and he's like, oh, I can do that. And so he goes and he loses his footing, his balance, he ends up in the marina. And so he's trying to climb up from boats and he can't do that, the whole entire deal. He's hollering, and so eventually someone hears him and they call the fire department. So my stepsister, I'm on the phone with her, she's like, your dad's been gone for like 4 hours and we don't know where he is. I'm like, oh great. She's like, hold on, the cops are here. And so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And so she's like, they've got his bike, I gotta go. And I'm like, I would like at least a dead or alive. Like that would be helpful, right? But he always released, like, so Jamie and I had to have a conversation. Does she tell him to stop going fishing? His one great love in his life. Does she say, you cannot do this anymore? And she and I both said, no. You know what, we're gonna release this. If he drowns, we're gonna be at peace. Because he was doing what he loved. And so both of us, I said, I release you of any guilt and of any blame or any consequence. And then when she and I were spreading his ashes in the ocean, and we're like, well, ocean, you finally got him. Like, you finally claimed him this time. But sometimes, right, you just have to release your cares to God. Just say, okay, whatever happens, God, this is in your hands. So this is kind of the tool that he's kind of utilized to go with this. For those of you who've been kind of in this class for a while, have you thought about this? Has this been helpful at all? What do you think? Yeah.
I think it's a really solid thinking process.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I've thought of it, used it a number of times. Back a couple of years ago, we were back in Minnesota, and a deer during the night ran into the side of the car. This horrendous sound destroyed the car. So I've gone through the whole process of being fearful about driving at night, and then I look at myself at the age that I am and think, how many miles have I driven, and how many deer have run into my car? Two in my lifetime. And kind of that's that whole issue about examining
In light of the facts.
the fact. And now I'm more at the point of God will take care of me. If another deer runs into me, we'll be okay.
We'll be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But for a while there, I had this picture in my head about, I can't go any place at night anymore.
Right.
And putting barriers around
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah, you were kind of frozen, kind of paralyzed in that.
Yeah.
Christine?
Well, I feel that the whole idea that you can't go anywhere without your phone.
Oh.
I have people that, if they forget their phone, they gotta go back to the
Yep.
house and get it. And I'm like, are you expecting a really important phone call? Well, no, but I
Yeah.
gotta have my phone. And I'm like, I'm 67 years old, and I never had a phone. And I made it this long without needing my phone every minute of the
Right.
day. It's
going without your phone, that anxiety. They actually was it maybe 60 Minutes. Anderson Cooper. He did a study, and they wired his brain up, right? And then they had him put his phone on vibrate, and they had it just out of reach. And then he was watching a TV show, and they wanted to study the brain system and so every time he heard his phone vibrate, there was something going on in his brain that caused the anxiety, right? It caused that because they're missing out. What's happening? What's going on? Is it something emergency? Is it not? What is that? So that fear. And again, I went for 60 years without a phone, and my world did not blow up.
Exactly.
Right? And it changes a lot because there's no house numbers, right? And so my mom's like, why don't you ever call? I'm like, because you never have your phone on you. And so why call knowing I'm not going to get you? And so, you go back and forth because now I'm so used to that immediate access and what that is. Okay, so we're going to watch our video because you guys all know I could talk to you forever. It's already 11:24. So let's watch our video for this week and then we'll move forward. Luke, roll it!
It's great to join you again today. I'm so excited about the conversation we have.
We've done crime and race. Yeah, we solved that one. We're on 4. 4 is apocalypse, change, missing out in finances. So Luke had to rip these off of the DVD because he didn't have the online access, so he has the different tracks on DVD, so we're still working that process. All right. Now I have fear of anticipation. Getting fear of disappointment. No, that's number 3.
Well,
So we have 5 options. It's one of we're like at a 50-50 shot, right? Don't make promises. My false sense of security.
Well, we're glad to be back with you again today for this conversation as we continue to talk about being afraid and how we can live unafraid with courage and hope in very uncertain times. Mm-hmm. So as we're thinking about that, today in this session, we're going to talk about apocalyptic thinking. So the idea that the world is coming to an end, and there's a sort of Christian version of that, and then there's the version that we entertain ourselves with blockbuster summer hits. And then there's the version that we look at in the world around us and just think everything's going to hell, and how are we going to survive this? And then we're going to talk about the fear of change. And this is a very real fear that we experience in our lives. We'll talk about the fear of missing out, or we might get to that. And we'll talk about some of our financial fears. And so that's where we're heading in this session. And I want to just jump in. And I want to begin by mentioning something I mentioned over and over again in the book. There's an acronym we talked about for fear that has to do with the things that aren't real. But then one of the approaches that I try to mention again and again in the book for dealing with fear is fear is facing your fears with faith. And that faith is not just our faith in God, but it's choosing what assumptions we believe, right? I think about it in Hebrews 11:1. It says this, a very famous passage most people have memorized, but in the Common English Bible, faith is the reality of what we hope for, the proof of what we don't see. Mm-hmm. And so we're believing in things that we don't see, and we can either believe in things we don't see in a positive way, or we can believe the worst possible assumptions about things and find ourselves deeply depressed or really, really afraid. So face your fears with faith, examine your assumption in the light of the facts, attack your anxieties with action. And so often if we just rest in our fear and we don't do anything about it, we find it just continues to it ruminates. We ruminate with it, and then releasing your cares to God. And so I want that to be sort of the backdrop as we talk about these fears. And when we think about apocalypse, I came to faith in Christ in a tradition where we heard almost every Sunday about the second coming of Christ, or the Antichrist was already here and present and alive. Did either of you grow up in settings where that was emphasized a lot?
Yes, it's constantly the apocalyptic rhetoric and just language is very present in the community, and I even see it in my community, in the congregation that I serve today, that they are every time that there's an occurrence like we experienced with the eclipse, I would see just people that were worried because there's something that is out of the norm, and it will bring up a lot of that language about this is the end of times, this is something that is coming up, and I feel like it just puts people on over the edge of the unknown, and it's just difficult time to pastor someone who is in that state of mind.
Right. It's interesting, all those promises in the Bible about the second coming of Christ were meant to instill hope. Of course, they were meant to tell you to be prepared any time, for the moment when you might die or you would meet Christ face to face, that the Lord is coming back. But they were always meant to instill hope, but instead, so often today, they're instruments of fear. I want to move beyond that to the fear of change. We were having a conversation in my small group, all the folks are my age or older, about how, we're afraid of our grandchildren being born into this world. And I wonder if our grandparents were afraid of us being born into this world. And you think about the change that happened over the technology, Ginger, what do you think about the fear of change?
To go with your point on, as a parent of children entering middle school, we moms get together and we talk about, so what is social media doing to our children? And, it's the Elvis of today, maybe, of like, this is going to ruin them. This is going to take them down. Everything they do is documented and then used against them. And, so it's hard to be a parent, not just changing things in chapters of life, watching your children, but seeing the things that can go wrong and the factors out of our control. And what it means to be a normal kid today looks like there's a lot of threats. And so I think that that's really where faith comes in of, God protect them, God help them make good decisions, help me mother, help me know what to say and what to do and when to intervene and when not to intervene. And But yeah, I live in fear of change for my kids.
Yeah.
One of the things with change that I see is within the congregation, there's 4 generations worshiping together. And so, and each generation has their own experience with technology. So how do we merge those different aspects so that we have a meaningful worship for everyone?
That is key. So I think part of what you mentioned is this fear of change, Carlos, leaves us unsettled inside. And sometimes when we're unsettled, then we begin to, our response to it is to react and to look at whatever the changes are and to just totally reject them out of hand. And I remember speaking with a man who was in his 70s when the internet was really coming on board, and he was really upset about the idea that you would have an email address and people could find you on the internet. And he said, I'm not going to have a computer. I am not going to have anything to do with this technology. And that was a reaction that we often have to that kind of change. So that kind of fear of change, coupled with the fear of the other, often leads us, even as people of faith, to turn away from things that God is calling us to do because of our fears. Seems like that's a common occurrence. I want to talk about and wrap it up with the fear of finance. And I'm wondering, Ginger, how have you experienced, or have you ever experienced, an insecurity about finances, a concern about finances, fear of finances? What does that look like?
Tied to my calling, actually. So I felt a calling to go to seminary. I wasn't sure what God would have me do with it, but I felt like I needed to make that change and explore it. I was never going to reach the earnings that I had in the business world, but I remember journaling about it one night and praying, and the way that my lines of journaling worked out, I had the word scared, and then I think this is sacred work, and the scared and the sacred lined up, and if you flip the letters, scared and sacred are just the C and the A reverse. And I felt like looking at that journal page, I was like, this is sacred work, and I'm scared, but maybe my scared is an indication that it's sacred, and that I'm supposed to do that. And that journal page really became a moment of, I felt God speaking to me of, just flip the way you're looking at this and you're going to be okay. We wake up in the morning saying, if I'm so successful, why am I so unhappy? And that's how I felt in my business career. Now I feel like I have a sense of meaning. I don't have as much money, but I wake up excited about what God will do with me today.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great conversation we've had today, and I'm anxious for the folks who are watching this to have your own conversation today about these things. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah.
I have with me today Jerry Stead. He is a remarkable leader. He's been CEO of many companies, CEO of NCR, Legion Corporation, Ingram Micro, IHS, and now most recently IHS Markit, one of the leading information providers in the world. And I've had a chance to know Jerry for some time, and I've just appreciated and respected his leadership so much. And Jerry, today we're talking about fear and the role that fear plays, in particular in the areas of finances, in the areas of leadership, and how fear changes the game when it comes to what's going on in our world around us. And I'd love to just ask you a few questions about this. I wonder, could you say a word about the role first that fear plays when it comes to the markets? Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, uncertainty creates fear, Adam. And a good example is when a company misses an estimate, that creates uncertainty, which creates great fear. I will say we're in a remarkable time right now, because in my view, in all the years I've led companies, there's more global uncertainty than I've ever seen, and yet the markets are I was going to say tending. They're not tending. They're actually ignoring a lot of it.
Interesting. So let's talk about, as a CEO of a company, and how fear, where do you see fear at work among employees? How do you manage to fear?
Well, that's a great question. I believe the really great leaders over-communicate. I try to all the time about change. Because the thing that creates the most fear for any person, any team, or any organization, again, is uncertainty. So, for example, when we announced the merger of IHS Markit, very big deal, both teams with over 15,000 people around the world, I got deluged, as I expected, with questions. What's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? Three things. One, they knew me well because I've led the company for the last 17 years, and I've always been open, honest, candid, caring with my communication. Two, I get out and touch as many of the people as I can. This year I've traveled 405,000 miles around the world to be with our customers and our people so they can ask anything they want to ask, and that's so critical. And then three is you lay out goals, which we did. We announced, actually, in our case, the day of the merger, what we're going to do financially, how quickly we would make the changes that impacted our people, and what we would do with building new infrastructure. Then reported on that and still do weekly. Those are the three things I've always used. But it starts with trust. You know, I operate with 100% trust of all my people. I try to make sure I earn their trust, because when that happens, that reduces fear when you tell them what's going to happen, communicate what's going to happen, and then measure what's going to happen.
Let me ask you, Jerry, as CEO, you carry a lot of responsibility. Are there times that you've been afraid personally or as a leader, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's also an excellent question. I get up, as you may remember, Adam, pretty early, about 3 o'clock every day. The first thing I do is exercise. Second thing I do is meditate. One of the things I do every day is read, even though I have it memorized upside down and backwards, is read actually Norman Vincent Peale saying, I believe, I believe, I believe. I believe that God will do his very best if I listen and learn. So I do that every day. So that gets me started because I have fears too, obviously. What I've learned over the years is that faith conquers fear 100% of the time.
Absolutely, that's great. So I want to end by mentioning something I include in the book, and that is your statement, which I've always appreciated, facts are our friends. Would you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I've used that a lot. As you can imagine, recently too, one of the new projects I've taken on is a business that is actually the leader in agriculture information in the world. I'm doing that as a give back to the world going forward after I retire here at the end of the year from IHS Markit. And when I got there, what they had been taught was give an answer, figure out later if it's right. And so I use facts as our friends on everything. Facts will give us what we need to do to be successful. Facts will help us think through what we need to do. And if we're fact-based on one side, then open, honest, candid, caring communication on the other, we'll succeed in everything. And I use that all the time, Adam.
That's excellent. One of the things that strikes me about you, Jerry, is that as I know you, it's never about how much money you can have and you can make, but instead you've looked at how do I use money to make a difference in the world. Would you say a little bit more about that?
As you know, we invest. We don't just give. We invest in things that we believe, Mary Jo and I believe, will make a huge difference to the world. And we've stayed very focused on that. As you may remember, we went through college got married after our freshman year, went through college on $2,900 a year. Lived great, by the way. But we said if we ever had a chance, we'd give everything away to make a difference to the world. And the joy of giving is the most wonderful thing there is. One example only, I started, as you may remember, 12 and a half years ago, the Research Center for Alzheimer's Research Institute in Phoenix. Today we're running a $500 million study on two vaccines in the United States, the UK, and Canada that will change the world if we make it happen. And we were able to invest and make that happen. I also had the honor of speaking to the 5,500 top Alzheimer's researchers in the world, asking them to do me a favor and spend all their time and energy going forward on partnering with each other to get rid of this. And so that's been the kind of thing we always do. It's because we made a decision to invest.
That's terrific, Jerry. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today and for being a part of this study. I really appreciate it. I admire you, I respect you, and I'm really grateful for the way that you have lived your life unafraid with courage and hope. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard what I heard, but here's what I heard. I heard that Jerry faced his fears with faith. I heard that he examined the assumptions in the light of the facts. I heard that he was regularly attacking his anxieties with action, and that in the end, he released his fears to God. And that worked for Jerry, and I think it can work for you. Let's live as people who are unafraid with courage and hope.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so in our next 20 minutes, we have the end of the world, we have fear of change, we have fear of missing out, and what was the fourth one? Finance. Yeah, that's easy. So let's first talk about the end of the world. Where are we at with the end of the world? In a fear of a scale, are we up here, we're afraid of it, down here?
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. When it happens, we can't stop it. Alan?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, I think even Pastor Tim yesterday in his sermon here on campus talked about it a little bit. And there's a great understanding of a couple of things, and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Right, we can't affect it as far as when Christ comes again or whether we blow ourselves up. Like either way, however the world's going to be, whether it's a meteor, it's Armageddon, and we got to send Bruce Willis up to go blow something up there. However we have whether it's a zombie apocalypse, right? Whether it's the next global pandemic, like there's all kinds of things. A reality of a nuclear war, of countries coming, right? I'm sorry, but us here at Resurrection Oro Valley, we're not going to be able to do anything about Putin, right? Like it's just, and so there's part of it of we can't do anything about it, so then what do? Do we get paralyzed in our fear? Right? Do we not leave our homes? Do we do the bomb shelters because we're surrendering to that? Or do we do what we can do to make a difference for the starfish that are around us? Right? The metaphor of you're walking through a beach and there's all these starfish walked up. There's a little boy throwing one at a time in. Someone says, I don't understand why you're doing that. You're not going to be able to get all of them. He says, well, no, but to this one, it really matters. Right? And throws the one starfish in. And so part of it is, do we go ahead and say, well, what starfish are around us? And how can we make a difference with those starfish? And so when it comes to the end of the world, right, there is a space of, it's going to happen. some point. And even Jesus talked about it. Gonna happen. But Jesus didn't just spend his time teaching about the end of the world. He healed people. He fed people. Right? He said, what can we do in the meantime? And some people say, well, does God even care? Is God just this absent God? And I love that they brought it out, that like the book of Revelation is all about hope. We've turned it all about fear and chaos. But the whole concept that in the book of Revelation, it's about the garden being restored. And it was to give hope so that when you are in persecution, you know that there's something more beautiful that's coming. And we in our sinful and brokenness, we twist that. And so the end of the world, but it's going to happen, but we don't need to fear it. And in the meantime, if you do get anxious, if you do have anxiety, if you do fear it, then take steps to help someone experience God's love and grace now and what that looks like. Change, right? The only thing constant in life is taxes. Is that right? Death and taxes? Is that the reality? Right? Change. Changes. How many of you guys like change? Yeah. Some of us. I will tell you, when except for all of the death and scariness, when COVID happened, I was so excited. I was less than 6 months. Well, no, I was less than a year at my church, right? And so change, and they talk about in churches, right? And I was in church. It was like 126, 135 years old. They didn't like to change very much. I loved it because it was like blank slate, right? Anytime I wanted to do something, no one could say, well, that's not how we do it here. Be like, well, when was your last pandemic, right? It's my first one. How about you, right? I thrive on change and chaos. So I lived 5 states, 5 churches, right? Bring it on. Let's try something new. So I thrive on change and chaos. I don't know if Pastor Tim enjoys that nearly as much, but that's, hey, let's change it up kind of thing. So there are people who do. Other people, that is not my idea of joy. Right? That it is not give me my steady Eddie. Right? Yeah, you probably don't need all the chaos making that I do sometimes, right? All of the pot stirring. There is some really great things about steady Eddies and having the combination of the two. What are some of the fears behind change, do you think?
That you'll be left behind.
Left behind.
Technology, it's so far ahead of me now that I don't know if I'll ever catch up.
Yeah, that the change happens and you're going to be left behind. So technology is a great example. What else? Yeah.
Anytime there's change, there's a learning curve, and so there's always a fear of inadequacy as you transition.
Yeah, there's a learning curve, and then there's that fear of inadequacy as you transition. Am I going to be able to figure this out? Yeah, good. What else?
In the church.
Uncertainty, that you don't know what the future will hold. Yeah, better to deal with the devil you know than the devil you don't. Yeah.
In the church, changing the service.
Yeah.
You feel like you might lose a lot of the depth, the old hymns.
Yes.
The words in the hymns,
Yes.
what that means.
Because, we're always raising our Ebenezer.
Yeah.
I'm so, as a kid singing that hymn, I'd always be like, Ebenezer Scrooge? Like, I don't know what an Ebenezer, or a diadem. Thank God for Harry Potter, so we know what a diadem is, right? And so some of those old hymns, people say, well, gosh, that contemporary music, it's just so superficial. Actually, those words speak to me because I understand what they are. Yeah, and so losing that depth, Ebenezer and Diadem, two of my favorite hymns.
I'm just talking, I think what I'm talking about is you lose the holiness of it or something, kind of.
The sacred?
Yeah.
Yeah, Judy.
We had a church I went to years ago, we had a gentleman that was very upset when they did the music with the piano and not the organ, because the organ was sacred music and going to the piano was not. I mean, that's the thinking.
Right.
was there. You know,
Right.
What are you doing? This is sacrilegious.
So at my church in South Carolina, they were in the traditional service. We only did communion twice a month, right? It was like a first and third kind of a deal. Contemporary service, we did it every week. And I'm an every week girl. I'm an every minute girl. I mean, give me communion whenever you can. I want to be at the table. And it was, no, this is traditional Lutheran. Right? And I was like, you want to know what traditional Lutheran is? Ask anyone what it was when they grew up. Right? Because that's your tradition. If you want to go traditional Lutheran, right, that was only when the Catholic priest, and you might get it like once every 6 months, depending on the itinerant preachers. Right? And so tradition, right, we don't want to change, but tradition is also, it's what you experience.
Transitioning to the whole technology we see in church today, using the hymnal, which was extremely complicated, really.
Yeah.
You have to flip your
Right. Small numbers, page numbers are different than hymn numbers.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You do that, but yet it was comfort in that. It was predictable.
Yes.
Once you knew how to do it. And then gradually the hymnal changed.
Yep.
And the hymns changed, and some of them I don't care if we go back to, because they're more like dirges than
Yeah.
rejoicing.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes I love some of the hymns, like when you actually look at the words as opposed to the music, like you'll have some of the happiest words, right? Or you'll have, and it's the blood of the Lamb and we're going to sacrifice. I mean, it's just like none of that makes sense, right? But so change, there's a whole wheel of change in education, what that looks like. But I think there's also something behind. He points it out in the book, but it's just beautiful, right? In John, here's another change, right? I carry my Bible on my phone. I have my Bible on my phone all the time. And quick story, Melinda remembered this in my interview process. We're up at Saddlebrook doing my interview, and the interview committee so greatly is like, yeah, we really want to be like an Acts 2 church. We really want to be an Acts 2 church. And so at that time, I went and I grabbed my phone, and so one of them was talking about it, and so I'm getting my phone to look up Acts 2. I know what it is, but I don't think we really know what it is. And so I'm doing that, but someone on my interview committee who works in HR told me later, my brain is like, she's done, she's out. Who in the middle of an interview grabs their phone to start texting? Like how do you, and so then I was like, well, let's look at Acts 2. And he's like, oh, she's got her Bible on her phone? Okay, she's back in, right? But that's a change, as I carry my Bible on my phone. But in John 5, I think it is. Yeah, John 5 is the story of the man who was at the pool at Bethsaida. And for those of you who have been to the Holy Lands, we went to where this is. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there was a pool called in Hebrew Bethsaida, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Now, if I was Jesus, I would say, "You didn't answer my question. My question wasn't, how come you haven't been made well? My question was, do you want to be made well?" And Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." Once the man was made well. And he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath. Do you want to be made well? I think sometimes the question about change and why it's hard is, if I'm not this, then who am I? What does it mean to change? And if I'm not grieving my Father, then who am I? Right? If I lose a bunch of weight, if I'm not always just the fat girl that nobody looks at, then who am I? If I'm not the strong, fierce, independent woman that everyone sees, then who am I? That I think sometimes behind that question, if we don't use the green book to worship, if we don't sing the songs that we always sang, if I don't vote the way I always voted, then who am I? Right? And so sometimes the fear of change is because we don't know who we will be if we allow God to continue to recreate us. Right? Like if we give God that space to give us change and what that looks like. Yeah, Cheryl.
You know, I think some of this has come with age, but that I believe is really what it means to surrender to Christ. You know,
surrender.
We've said that our whole life, but when you're willing to say, "Who am I if I'm not a teacher anymore? Who am I?"
Yeah, retirement has to be huge, right? When you say, who am I if I'm not this anymore? And I will be sexist in this. I think men go through this harder than women go through this when it comes to retirement, because we have done a disservice to our men telling them that they are their job. And we as a society have said, you are the breadwinner, you are your job. And so if you are not that, then who are you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of related, I think, to feeling like you might be losing your mission and purpose.
Yeah, feeling like you're losing your mission and your purpose. Yeah. Yeah, and I think when our bodies change, right? I know when my dad had his massive stroke, and my dad was always this big, strong man, and he had a temper and struck fear in everyone. And so he had a stroke that changed him a lot, and physically as well. And so he was at the apartment. He called some guys. They needed to come work on the ice on the refrigerator. He got in a fight with them because that's what he always does. It's not working. It is working. But Dad said, it's the first time ever I was afraid. I said, what do you mean? He said, I knew if they started something, I couldn't get out of the chair. I couldn't defend myself. Right? And then he had to deal with, if I'm not the guy who never had to fear, then who am I? Right? And so I think, asking some of those questions, if I'm not that, then who am I? You know what? I'm still a child of God. I'm still beloved. I still have purpose and meaning. And so what does that look like when we look at change? FOMO, how many of you guys had seen that phrase before? FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out? How many of you guys suffer from fear of missing out? Anyone? Yeah, I don't. People are like, hey, we're going to go out. Awesome, I'm going to bed. Like, tell me the next day what you did. I got none. I'm not a FOMO. But I am a FOMO about relationships, like of missing out. But there is that, and again, technology, this is what I've learned with phones, is like when we do events and we tell kids not to bring their phones, it's not because when they don't see what's happening, it creates this fear of missing out. So when they see all of the things that their friends are doing, then they feel like they're missing out on those, and it doesn't allow them to focus on the present, right? So we say unplug from your phones, plug in here. And so technology, again, has really, I think, amped us even more into our FOMO, because we see what so many other people are doing. Our news, our vacations, the travel channel. I mean, hello, travel. The food channel, right? Fear of missing out. Can I get a chef, please? Right? Like, all of these things continue to help us. And then he introduced the fear of a better offer, right? FOBO. Right, this fear of better offer. So I will tell you, online dating creates this, the swipe effect, and they've done research on this, that now people are less willing to commit in relationships because they feel there's a better offer out there. Right, even while you're sitting on a date, and you may fall in love with this guy, I think he's the best thing since sliced butter. There's still something in your brain saying, who else is swiping on me? And could I find someone better? Yeah?
Yesterday at the meeting when they talked about
Loneliness.
And largest demographic being 19 to
925, yeah.
Yeah, and I wondered how much this all plays into that sense, because they're not communicating with each other. They're not in a real way. They're communicating via social
Yeah,
media and
yeah.
so forth, but you lose that personal sense of where that person is, you know, the
And
body language
yeah,
and all
yeah.
that goes on, and looking for a better offer.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
it spirals a little bit. So she's talking about the ages of people in loneliness, and it's young adults who are really experiencing that. So when you think of FOBO, fear of a better offer, what that also creates is fear of failure in making a decision. And so you start to see the delayed adolescence, right, where they're spinning because they don't want to make the wrong decision, because what if there was a better decision? And so then they're not connecting. So they're not connecting to individuals. They're not connecting to careers. You'll see people, some people are professional students because they just, there's more to learn, or there's more to do, or I don't want to make the wrong choice, the wrong career, which then goes into disappointing people, right? So all of this starts to spiral into what all of this is. I think it's a violation of the 9th and 10th commandment. What's the 9th and 10th commandment about? Coveting. Right? That it's this desire for what you don't have. Looking for perfection, looking for the right thing. It's the grass is always greener, which actually scientifically that is actually proven, just so you know, that when you're looking at grass from the opposite side, the way the sun hits it, it actually is greener. So that's where that phrase comes from. But it's actually scientifically it is always greener on the other side. But it's when we covet, we create this fear of missing out, fear of a better offer. The resolution to that then is becoming grateful in what you have and who you are. Right? That you are not missing out because you are experiencing something beautiful right here. There may be another choice, but the offer that you have right now is an amazing offer to be able to be experienced. And so I think some of that FOMO, that FOBO, that always that hedonism, I mean the next iPhone, the next this, the next that, if we can learn to practice contentment within ourselves for what God has given us, and through that is gratitude, but to practice the gratitude, then we begin to become more rooted in who God is creating us to be able to experience that. The last little part was on finances, and there's a couple of interesting things in there. One of them, he does talk about our younger generations are living differently, that they, and maybe, I don't know if any of you are a part of this world, where your adult kids are coming back, and they're like, yeah, no, fine, I'll live in your basement, I'm good with that, because I really want to travel. I really want to do, so my friend, Pastor Jenny, she does live with her parents, but she lives in her parents' basement. She's, I'm 49, so she's 39. But she traveled, like her job is, it makes no sense for her to pay for an apartment, but probably 6 months of the year, she's in different countries. Right? And so for her, the status of living on your own, which is what I grew up with, like I would be considered a failure if I ever moved in with my parents. Right? I didn't make it. For her, it's like, meh, it's just better to save money this way. Like why? And so our millennials, they are kind of living, they are making choices like thrift stores, the golden goose, right? Thrift stores are all the cool thing nowadays because they want experiences. They don't want the materials. And so I will just offer to you, I know gift cards are really hard for our older generations to give as gifts, where the younger generations like, well, just give me a gift card. Experiences, right? Buy them a gift card to your favorite restaurant and say, I want to go to dinner with you and I'm going to pay for that. Tell me how the dinner was, right? I'm going to buy a gift card and here's to the movie theater. Tell me what movie you're going to go see. I'll go see it too. And then we can talk about it, right? Think about those gift cards as experiences because that's what they want. is that experience to be able to be together, to do things together. When you think, because I know a lot of our millennials, they're like, just give me a gift card, just give me cash and I can do what I want with it. Well, you can do that in a way that still gives that experience. A lot of churches, they whenever I leave, they give me 2 types of gift cards. Starbucks, because they know. And then the other one is some people will research the shoe stores that are in the new places that I'm living in. And they're like, well, if they don't have a DSW, what do they got? And so then they will give me, because they know, like, I will buy shoes that are experiences. And my last church in Minnesota, they gave me enough Starbucks cards that I had 6 months worth of coffee that I didn't have to pay for. And they knew, like, this was, and every time I'd take a picture, I'd be like, thank you, St. Andrews. I'm sitting here, because they knew it would be the experience of what that would be. So with our finances. Okay, so a couple of things. It's 12:04. I've learned 90 minutes just to have cush time. Next week is our last week for this class. We then will take a little break. There are lots of things happening starting in January. One of them, Melinda, you've got a women's study that starts in January, yes? Yes, so there's going to be a women's study on the 3rd Saturday of the month from 9 to 11. So if you are a woman, that's going to be here, not here in the sanctuary, but here on campus. And you're going to be doing basket case, talking about anxiety, right? Yep, can't stop talking about that. Also, Rob Hartman is going to be doing a study on Luke, the 2nd and 4th Tuesday from 6:30 to 8. So that's an evening study. That'll be happening. And then in February, just so you know, on Tuesday mornings here from 10:30 to 11:30 is Jeff Krause always does a book study every year. And it's Do I Stay Christian by Brian McLaren, which will be really, really good as well. Yes?
We're starting one today, 1 o'clock at Dove Mountain, and we are determining today what we're going to do is probably going to be a book of the Bible.
Nice.
With the serendipity assist.
Yeah, so that's a 1 o'clock Dove out of Dove Mountain.
It will be a couple of Mondays a month.
Couple of Mondays a month. Yeah, and so I'm working on, and then I am going to be doing Bible 101 starting in January. And Bible 101 is a class, again, it's based off of Adam Hamilton's books, but it is a walkthrough of the Bible. It is talking about how do we read the Bible, interpret the Bible, give some good history and context, and then we start to go through some topics as well, and so to create conversation. I'm trying to put together an education calendar so I can kind of see when things are happening so that we're able to offer a diversity of options. But I also don't ever want to offer something on top of someone else because we've got some really great things happening. So I'll be doing that as well, just so you guys can think about in the future. All right, but next week is our last week. Yes?
Sorry, Pastor Eric.
Yeah.
When will that start?
It'll start in January, but I'm looking to see as far as dates and times as to what that looks like. And just also with my schedule so I can make sure I do some, make sure I'm hitting things in a good spot. But yeah, I love it. It'll be my 3rd time doing it here at this church. So it just helps us create some Bible awareness. A lot of people I'm learning, especially if you grew up with a Catholic tradition as well, you were not encouraged really to read scripture for your own sake. And again, the Bible's not easy. It's just not. And context. And so that's really helpful. So yes, I'll be starting that in January. All right, thank you all very, very much. Go in peace, serve the Lord, don't be afraid. You got this.